Mahagut Las Ceann Comhairle, and I want to begin by extending a personal tribute to Deputy Micheál Martin, to Teachta Micheál Martin, for his public service, and personally also to thank him for the courtesy, Deputy Martin, that you've extended to me since I became a TD in this House. I do appreciate that. And I think we all acknowledge you took office at an unprecedented time of challenge during the COVID-19 pandemic, and of course since then we've faced the additional enormous challenge of the fallout from Russia's brutal war on Ukraine, and at a time where we are also facing this existential climate catastrophe. I think that has to be acknowledged. It must also be acknowledged that very few people get to choose of their own free will their time of stepping down as Taoiseach, and so for that alone today is certainly unique. However, we in Labour cannot support the Fine Gael nomination at this changeover time. We do not believe that this changeover, so-called, represents anything but a cosmetic change at a time when we do need to see a real and substantial change in the policies and the solutions proposed by government. Because we in Labour know, as people across the country know, that this government is not delivering an Ireland that works for all, an Ireland of equality. And one of our party's founders, Thomas Johnson, over 100 years ago in 1919, wrote in the democratic programme of the First Dáil, "It shall be the first duty of the Government of the Republic to make provision for the physical, mental and spiritual well-being of the children, to secure that no child shall suffer hunger or cold from lack of food, clothing or shelter." Important words, and yet nearly 250,000 children today live in deprivation, with 3,480 children homeless. And a week from Christmas, far too many parents will struggle to heat homes this winter, to put food on the table for their children, or to ensure that Santa brings a gift. Las Ceann Comhairle, we've come through a once-in-a-century pandemic. We've seen the capacity of the state to pivot, to deliver change and to deliver public services and deliver radical change urgently. And yet this government has failed to seize the opportunity to refashion our housing provision, our social infrastructure, our health service. At a time of strong budget surpluses, we've seen the opportunity to transform our country and our society squandered. Now is when we need a radical vision to bring about a real change in policy, at a time when we're seeing this brutal war being waged in our continent, with tens of thousands killed in Ukraine and millions of refugees fleeing Russian aggression. We're seeing a return of inflation ravaging incomes, hitting those on low wages, on pensions and social welfare the hardest. And we're seeing ominous signs of a slowdown, with job losses in the tech sector and the stalling of construction projects slowing down the building and delivery of new homes. We're seeing record heat waves across Europe this summer, a sharp reminder of stalled progress and untenable delays on bringing about renewable energy and the action necessary to meet our ambitious climate targets. We were told in 2020 that this was a programme for government that would invest in climate action, that would deliver a new energy system. But once again, we're seeing a climate action plan for next year delayed, and no sign of the necessary reductions in emissions that need to be delivered upon now and next year. When the outgoing Taoiseach was nominated 2.5 years ago, we were told the test of the government would be one of delivery. And that's the right test. But on all the key measures of delivery and of success, this government has failed. Homelessness is up, healthcare waiting lists are up, and carbon emissions are up. Too many children have inadequate homes. Too many children with autism lack appropriate school places or any school places. Too many parents are unable to find an affordable home or a suitable childcare or early years place, with no sign of promised reductions in creche fees and creches closing. Too many workers remain on low and insecure pay, stuck in traffic jams without decent public transport options. And too many older people remain deeply anxious as we face into the winter about heating their homes or getting the care they need. Ireland remains far too dependent on fossil fuels, with surging use of energy in data centres and the failure to build the offshore wind we've been promised for so long, the offshore wind generation capacity that is so sorely needed. So the failure of delivery on so many fronts should have refashioned the agenda and the policies of this government. And instead, what we're seeing with today's cosmetic changeover is a programme for government that's unchanged, with no new ambitions and the same complacency. At the midway point of this coalition, why are we seeing no substantive revision in policy? Why are we seeing a programme for government that remains out of step with the changed world? And why are we seeing the same ministers retained in departments where they're simply not delivering necessary change? Now, maybe the new Taoiseach will surprise us later today with more dramatic changes that have been expected. But unless the policies of the government and the programme for government are revised, there will be no change in delivery and lack of delivery. And this is also a government that has been plagued by resignations, by instability and by ethical concerns. We know, or we can predict, I think, at this stage, that Deputy Leo Varadkar will return to the office of Taoiseach, and on a personal level, I wish Taoiseach Varadkar very well. But his party has spent too long in government and has run out of ideas. In the 7 years since Fine Gael have been in government, since the 2016 general election, they have singularly failed to resolve the housing crisis and indeed have made it worse, with an ideological insistence on over-reliance on the private sector to deliver homes, delivery that is simply not happening. We've seen a catalogue of unforced errors by ministers, while talented backbenchers apparently remain blocked from taking high office. And the erosion of standards in public office has indeed accelerated in more recent years under this Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil government. A laissez-faire approach to ethics rules and appointment processes and the growing habit and tendency to centralise power with ministers and to ram legislation through the Oireachtas, as this week with the planning legislation, points to a growing arrogance and complacency. There has been no progress on the public sector standards bill first developed by Deputy Brendan Howlin that would have overhauled ethics legislation and standards in public office. We did see yesterday the outgoing Minister for Public Expenditure issue a press release to announce approval of a report on the ethics review, but we still have no draft law, despite SIPO repeatedly asking for more powers and despite multiple scandals in recent years. So today the Labour Party are putting the government on notice on the need to act urgently on ethics reform, and we will be pressing this in the new year. Last Count Corla, when the Dáil last gathered to elect a Taoiseach, I was not a member. And indeed, the only electoral contest since the coalition was formed delivered a clear rebuke to the punch and judy politics of Fine Gael versus Sinn Féin. The Dublin Bay South by-election result last July 2021 showed the public desire for a more constructive, positive, left-wing alternative to the status quo, a demand for strong state intervention on housing, on care, on climate and on jobs. And that demand is the reason why the Labour Party in 2020 made clear that we could not support or form part of the government formation. The permanent improvements we wanted to see in public services and increased state investment would require commitment to a change in tax policy, particularly on wealth. And our view of this was confirmed by the recent report of the Commission on Taxation and Welfare. Yet in 2020 and since, both Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil have consistently ruled out changes in tax policy, limiting scope for a government to deliver transformational change. They've consistently ruled out the necessary increase in state investment, in particular in services. And we know that therefore they cannot deliver the necessary change, particularly on housing, but also on care and on climate and on building communities. Throughout the course of this Dáil, the Labour Party has put forward constructive, social democratic and socialist alternative policies. We've worked to deliver change from opposition, and we will continue to outline our vision of an Ireland that works for all. On workers' rights, we've proposed legislation on sick pay, a living wage, a real right to flexible work and pay rises for workers. On housing, our renters' rights bill would have limited grounds for eviction and would have frozen rents. Our bill to implement the Kenny report would end land speculation and hoarding. On care, we've championed student nurses, community and care workers and a public universal childcare scheme. On climate, we've argued for radical measures, including a €9 a month climate ticket and genuinely ambitious state action on emissions. And more generally on reform, we've argued for a ban on gambling ads, for reform of our citizenship rules, for rights for cohabiting couples and a national autism strategy. On the economy, our fully costed budgets and cost of living measures would have put this country on a pathway to deliver real equality. And that's the sort of Ireland that the Labour Party wants to see, an Ireland that would work for all. And that's why in the next election, we will offer a clear vision and alternative to both narrow nationalism and to right-wing orthodoxy and ideology. We will be offering a social democratic, socialist alternative to the Punch and Judy show, a show that may grab headlines but that will not deliver change. Lascan Corla, I've always believed that social and economic rights, social and economic equality are two sides of the same coin, and that's why I joined the Labour Party. And campaigning for economic justice and standing up for those struggling to meet ends meet, those are core to the vision and values of our party. And now, today, more than ever, as we see the failure of the market-knows-all policies of this government, we know that Labour values of equality, solidarity and fairness are needed more than ever. And that's why today we will not be supporting the Fine Gael nomination for Taoiseach, and that's why we believe that instead of cosmetic change, we need to see real and substantial change in Ireland. Gur maith agat.